Okay, I think it's started. Let me check. Okay. It's started. Yes. Yeah, it's on.
Okay, we're on.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Good morning, good evening, and welcome. It's a great honor to have this discussion with you guys, and I think we have people who might be joining us any minute, starting now. And later, the video of this conversation will actually go up online, and others will get a chance to view it afterward. But for now, I think, yeah, for the next hour, hopefully we can have some time to have more informal chat about the recent situation in Hong Kong. So before we go into the discussion about Hong Kong and the arrests and the imprisonment of the democracy movement leaders in Hong Kong, I think I should introduce all of us who are here. So my name is Tendor, and I am program director at Tibet Action Institute. And I'm the former executive director of Students of Free Tibet, and basically, yeah, a Tibetan activist based in New York. And I'll be moderating this discussion between three very well-known activist leaders of Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Tibet. So first we have Johnson Yeung. Johnson is from Hong Kong. He is one of the key leaders of the democracy movement in Hong Kong, and one of the key organizers of the Umbrella Revolution in Hong Kong. And he has also been a Herford Youth Fellow at the National Endowment for Democracy. So Johnson is in Hong Kong right now, and we are really glad to have him. Then we have Lin Feifan from Taiwan. And Lin Feifan is one of the most well-known iconic leaders of the sunflower movement in Taiwan. And basically, I think a lot of people will remember Lin Feifan from, I think it was 2014, when basically, yeah, thousands of students led by and organized by Feifan and his friends basically brought the whole country to a standstill and changed the course of politics in Taiwan. So it's a great honor to have Feifan with us here. And next we have Dorjee Tseten from New York. And Dorjee Tseten is the executive director of Students of Free Tibet right now. And he is also a member of the Tibetan Parliament in exile. So three of you guys, I have some questions for you about the situation in Hong Kong. And I think we'll start with Johnson, because Johnson is based in Hong Kong and he's one of the leaders of the movement in Hong Kong. So I think it'd be great if, Johnson, you can give us a brief overview of exactly what happened in Hong Kong, exactly why this moment is a critical event in the history of Hong Kong's democracy movement.
Okay, thank you. So right now, Hong Kong is under attack from all fronts from the Chinese government, and it's the moment that it besieged the civil society from all fronts too. What is landmarking in these 2 weeks is we have our first groups of political prisoners, 16 of them, in Hong Kong history. In the past 2 decades, we doesn't have any political prisoner who were persecuted by the government because they fight for human rights and democracy. So it was a 2 separate cases. For the first 13 political prisoners, they were fighting for land rights, and also they tried to protest some of the villages from forced evictions from the villages, which is originated from a unjustified development program that was imposed by the government and conducted in black box operations. And those activists, they were trying to storm into the parliament in 2014, sorry. And they finished their sentencings for social service order already, but the Department of Justice filed an appeal on their sentences, and a lot of them were sentenced to 13 months of imprisonment. And the second case is more landmarking too, which concern with the three umbrella young leader, which include Alex Chow, Joshua Wong, and also Nathan Law. So in 2014, a lot of people knows about the umbrella movement. It was caused directly by students storming into Civic Square. Basically, it was a square in front of the government headquarters, which was blocked by the government. And because those student leaders, they want to reclaim rights to assembly and also demonstration, they tried to storm, just climb over some fence. And then they were caught by the police. They were arrested by the police. Last year, they were sentenced with social order services again. But then the Department of Justice, they were not satisfied that. That's why they filed an appeal. And last week, they were sentenced for 6 to 8 months into prison. And this is the situation right now in Hong Kong. We have our first groups of political prisoners, which are young, which uphold the principles of non-violence, which was not act because of self-interest, but then they were imprisoned by the government. And what's worse is government is trying to impose even more restrictions on demonstration and also freedom of expressions. So for these two cases, it's actually imposed a higher bar for political participations in street action, because those three umbrella leaders, they only climb over barriers. They didn't incite any violence. They even uphold non-violence principle and said it explicitly. But the court said even they just climb over the fence, they were considered as violence. So it really imposed a high threshold for political participation on the street. So in the future, you can anticipate that even slight or minimum confrontations with the police would be considered as violence, and thus people who are arrested might face jail time for 6 months or even a year. And then today, the Chinese government is trying to impose a new law, stand a national law, which prohibit behavior on changing or abusing national anthems of China, which extend the national law to Hong Kong, and it's a restrictions on the freedom of expression, but I can explain it later. So this is a brief situation in Hong Kong now. The civil society is besieged. The cost of street protests is higher than ever. And then we have a lot of young activists, idealist young activists who are behind bars now.
Thank you, Johnson. And I think, yeah, what you said about the fact that Hong Kong now has political prisoners for the first time is actually very interesting, and it's very terrifying at the same time. And we have Lin Fifan here from Taiwan, and one of the things that a lot of people have been commenting about and found very interesting is the parallels between Taiwan and Hong Kong in terms of the social movement and also the youth movement. The fact that both the democracy movement in Taiwan, to protect democratic rights in Taiwan, and also in Taiwan has been led by college students, right, including Fifan. And now we see that in Hong Kong also the movement to resist the repressive tactics of the Chinese government, the effort to protect Hong Kong's supposedly one country, two systems kind of rights that were guaranteed to it. So the people who are leading this revolution in Hong Kong also happen to be the young people of Hong Kong, students. And so, Feifan, in your idea, right now, of course, in many ways, Taiwan and Hong Kong are very different. Taiwan is a de facto independent country, like many other nations around the world. But right now, in Taiwan, what is the public opinion about what's happening in Hong Kong? You guys are neighbors. Both are, small islands. And there was a lot of cultural exchange and academic exchange between Taiwan and Hong Kong. And I also know that you are yourself, personally friends with many of the organizers in Hong Kong, many of the leaders in Hong Kong. So in your opinion, what's going on in Taiwan youth movements, people's mind, and how are Taiwanese viewing what's unfolding in Hong Kong?
Okay. First of all, yeah, I have to say hello to everybody. But to my personal, very personal feeling, I have to say it first is, including Joshua, including Alex, including Nathan Law, including Willis Hall, they're actually my friends, and so we know each other very deeply. And it's really hard to imagine that this kind of situation happens so fast. In this June, when I was getting married and I holding my wedding in Taiwan, in the central of Taiwan, which is near Taichung City. Actually, Alex, Nathan, Willis, and Joshua, they all come to my wedding just 2 months ago. Yeah. So for me, it's really we didn't expect or anticipate that this kind of situation happens so soon and so fast. So I personally feeling very, very, how to say, upset and also very sad about what they have faced right now. So we even think that does they sleep well, or does they also worry about their own situation? Does they also do they also miss their friends, and how they we don't even know how they're thinking right now. So it's a very strong feeling that I have right now. It's like not only personally, but also to the whole society, including Hong Kong and Taiwan, and I believe it's also including Tibet. To me, Hong Kong and Taiwan as we're on the same front line of countering the expansion of China's authoritarian regime and their authoritarian influence. And we currently, to me, a lot of friends in Taiwan are pretty worried about once Hong Kong were defeated by this kind of authoritarian rule, the resection of democracy, then how Taiwan can act, and how Taiwan, as a democratic country in East Asia, can act more. And I believe that also at the front line of countering the China's authoritarian regime, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Tibet are actually allies. We actually are facing the same situation, but while Tibet's situation is more it's worse than Hong Kong and also Taiwan. Taiwan, just what do you say, that Taiwan has still the status quo that we still have our own independence, and so it seems that we still have some protection. But recently, I think that the China's influence, using their authoritarian influence to influence or to impact on other regime, other nations, it's become more and more serious, and it's become it's beyond our imagination. So in this regard, I would say that Taiwan and Hong Kong and Tibet, and also many nations in this region, have to work together to be advocate to support our friends in Hong Kong. But to be honest, that currently in Taiwan, not so many people are aware of this situation. So discussing about Hong Kong's situation in Taiwan is not so much. It's like people are not usually discuss about Hong Kong, it's including Three Umbrella Movements case, including other 13 members of development scheme. Yeah, so we're still trying to make those voices out in Taiwan and help that and hope that Taiwanese people, majority of Taiwanese people, can also pay attention on this, because just what I say, once that Beijing has the ability, capacity to block Hong Kong's democracy and block Hong Kong's activists through this kind of brutal way, then which means that they have more ability to do it, to influence on the whole regime. And so it's really a crisis that we are facing now in the East Asia region, and we have to face it together and also to cooperate with each other. So I believe that not only Taiwan, Hong Kong, Tibet, but also the whole world in the international community who support democracy, who support human rights, who support freedom, who support the equality, have to work together and to face the reality that China now has the ability to crush Hong Kong's rule of law, to make Hong Kong's democracy to retrograde. Yeah.
Thank you, Feifan. I think that was very insightful. And Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Tibet, all three are definitely connected in very intimate ways. And we cannot ignore the fact that what happens in one place has huge impact on the others. And it reminds me of one of the discussions that came up during a class that I took somewhere, about how whether a particular nation is democratic or not, one of the key factors that determine that is actually the region, whether that nation is located in a region where there are other nations that are democratic or not. So what that means is basically what happens in our neighborhood has direct impact on our own democracy, our own freedom. So we really cannot afford to ignore these types of situations in our backyard. And now for Dorjee, I think as a representation of the fact that these three nations, these three peoples are connected in the same struggle. There was a historic conference that was held by Students for Free Tibet in Taiwan earlier this year, where there were activists from Hong Kong, from Taiwan, and from Tibet. And you were the main organizer of this conference in Taiwan, and I was hoping that you might be able to tell us a little bit about the logic and reasoning behind this conference, why this was important, and how this plays into the unfolding situation in Hong Kong right now.
Okay, so for hosting this call, and yeah, before talking about the conference, I want to share my solidarity, not only as a Tibetan, but also as a person who believe in justice and believe in justice, to share my solidarity for our Hong Kong friend who's now in prison. And we and as you asked about the conference which we organized last April, among the HongKonger activists right now in prison, Alex Chow and Sunny was present. And actually, this call now, we had actually planned before to discuss more about the three movement, and we invited Alex Chow to join us. But unfortunately, he is not with us. The purpose of this conference was to really build a network, a platform where key activists and leaders of this movement to come together and to discuss about our movement. We can see that that our fight is even though we are fighting for a movement, but human oppressor, and how we can have a collective kind of platform, collective kind of which will bring us most, which make us, and that's why this first Hong Kong, Tibet, Taiwan conference was held in Taiwan last April 2000 by Students of Free Tibet, and also supported by Human Rights Network for Tibet and Taiwan, based in Taiwan. And we had like
Dorjee.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, the video, your video is a little bit shaky, so I think there may be some bandwidth issues. Do you want to try turning off the video so the audio might improve? Okay, let's try now.
Yeah. Oh, can you hear me now? Is my voice clear?
We'll see. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So with this conference, we had 30 key activists from all these three movements, and at the resolution, we agree that we will work together, we will stand together in our fight for freedom, justice, and human rights. And therefore, I think it's really important right now, since Hong Kong activists are in a critical situation, and on behalf of the network and also on behalf of Students of Free Tibet, as soon as we hear about the jailing of Hong Kong, release a statement of solidarity on behalf of Students of Free Tibet. Activists and members are in more than 30 countries, and we condemn strongly and also recall international community to stand with Hong Kong right now. But more important, I will let you know that the main corner, of course, China is behind, communist regime is behind the arrest. But why China is so threatened by new vision? And that is why I think what is happening right now in Tibet, where a lot of like young Tibetans who are stepping up and taking the resistance are being jailed. And with what we see recently in last over a few years, how the current regime under Xi Jinping has arrested lawyers in China, and now what is happening in Hong Kong is a sign that repression under this regime. But at the same time, the regime is so insecure, the regime is so fearful that they think that by using this fear, they will stop the resistance, and that will not happen. And I saw Joshua Wong before going to made a post, and he said that the communist regime and the oppress them, they can kick them out from parliament, the heart of people, but they will never crush the call for freedom and the hope for freedom that is already there. And I think what is happening in Hong Kong right now and Taiwan before, gradually Chinese activists and Chinese youth in China are learning about it. They are getting more information about democracy, and that is actually the main reason why they are so much fearful, and they think that right now is the time. So I think this is an action which is taking a desperate action from the community to stop what is happening, which is already out of their hand. So I think that will not succeed. Therefore, like as a Tibetan activist, and we share our solidarity and support for the Hong Kong activists and Taiwanese activists, and we feel we are together in in the fight for freedom.
Yeah, I would like to use this opportunity to thank you for students, for free Tibet and also Tibetans showing up and showing your solidarity with Hong Kong people. We really appreciate it.
And actually, for Johnson, actually, you know, after what Tseten just said, I think what has become really obvious to a lot of people is the fact that this is actually a new big step for the Chinese government in Hong Kong, right? They have basically changed course. And in a way, using this kind of weapon or using this kind of very severe punishment for somebody who participated in nonviolent resistance, who participated in civil expression of their freedom. I think by doing this, by giving somebody a jail sentence of 6 months up to a year, in a way, it is an admission of defeat on China's part, right? Because when a government loses its legitimacy, when a government loses its authority, that's when they rely on force. That's when they have to rely on brute force to make somebody do their bidding. Otherwise, they can no longer use their authority to make people do things that they would like to do, right? So this admission of defeat of China's in Hong Kong, or this basically a signaling of a loss of authority from the Chinese government, how will it impact the democracy movement in Hong Kong, in your opinion? Because in many other movements, usually, you know, of course, like I know that a lot of people in the past would look to Hong Kong and say, well, 15 years ago, one thing everybody used to say about Hong Kong was, well, people in Hong Kong do not really care much about democracy or human rights or freedom. People in Hong Kong are happy as long as the government stands out of their way and allows them to do business. You know, that was almost like it's a stereotype of the Hong Kong average person, but it was a very widespread stereotype in the rest of the world. But right now, I think that image of Hong Kong has completely changed. And 15 years forward to today, I think many people equate Hong Kong with a spirit of resistance, a spirit of democracy, a spirit of bravery and courage. And in many movements, you know, usually when there is a political prisoner, like Nelson Mandela, that can actually serve to strengthen the movement, right? So in a way, in your opinion, now the fact that Hong Kong has 3 high-profile political prisoners for the next 6 to 8 months, and also 13 political prisoners for the next 1 year, and nobody knows what will happen to these sentences, whether they might get extended again, right? So in your opinion, how will this particular event impact the democracy movement in Hong Kong?
So Joshua Wong actually get another case, and it's highly possible that his sentence will extend because of the other case. So also in the future, in the next 6 months to a year, there will be more than 100 young activists who are charged in court. So we expect there will be more political prisoners. Point is really hard to say whether this more repressive environment will cause a wider backfire from the civil society, whether people will be more cynical or will people be more dedicated and determined into the democratic movement. We will have to see and also work. And of course, we hope that people will be more determined and committed into democratic movement. And one way to trying to help with it is international solidarity, because with international community recognizing people effort and also determinations into democratic movement, Hong Kong people will be more strongly committed into democratic movement. And also, I think the leaders are doing a good job. The prisoners are doing a good job in re-energizing people's mind. So before, they wrote a lot of articles and they left a lot of messages to Hong Kong people. And so, for example, he wrote a 3,000 words article, and he emphasized love and also determinations. That we should love with each other, that we people should embrace and also treasure the value and try to recognize the value that we are fighting for. And I think this is the spirit that Hong Kong people should uphold in the next 6 months. And I will say I am a little bit more optimistic judging from what happened in last Sunday. So last Sunday, we organized a huge rally to support the political prisoner, and it was the largest one, largest mobilizations ever after the Umbrella Movement. So we do see people are very angry about it. We do see that there is a huge backfire on the political prisoner repressions. So the big question right now is how do we endure and also sustain this momentum? What kind of work we can do in order to keep these people engaged? And one way is, of course, the political prisoner campaign that we hope we can still sustain it for the next 6 months. And I would like to point out one thing, which I see there's a similarity for all three countries we have today, which is Tibet, Taiwan, and also Hong Kong was promised one country, two system at different point in history. So the idea was actually raised in the 1950s as a solution to Tibet. And then it was raised as a solution to Taiwan, and finally it was implemented in Hong Kong. And from international community perspective, one country, two system is an experiment for China to try to see how democratic transitions can work inside mainland China. Recently, I have another perspective to this narrative of testing ground. I think China is not testing it as a way to trying to see how democratic transition can work in China, but the other way around, which is to see how an authoritarian regime can balance with liberal values or liberal culture in a society. So Hong Kong has been a liberal society. We doesn't have democracy even in the colonial era, but then people enjoy a lot of economic freedom and liberal culture, exposed to different culture, and also open society in Hong Kong too. And China is actually experiencing the same thing because they have to open their market. They want to replace the US as the head of the whole new globalizations. So in this process, the market have to open to the world. The culture have to be exposed to different culture, including democratic culture. So what they are trying to do now is by using rule of law, or I should say rule by law, as a package and as a thorough phases to the world, to tell the world that they're following some kinds of rules. At the same time, they can use this law as a tool to repress on people who have different opinion or people who really seek for liberal democracy. So I would say for other countries in the world, it is the moment to try to witness how China is testing it, how China is trying to increase their repressions on the liberal society by creating a parallel civil society, by using the language of law, by creating their own political elite, and try to isolate people who really embrace the idea of democracy. So this will be an insight for all three countries here.
Thanks, Johnson. And Feifan and Dorjee, do you have any comments or thoughts on what Johnson just mentioned?
I think Johnson have just said that is pretty similar as many people outside Hong Kong's observation. Especially, I actually noticed that in some degree, I think China using this opportunity, I mean, using to violate or to oppress Hong Kong's rule of law in this kind of brutal way. They're trying to test the response of the Western democracy, how the Western liberal democracies will respond to this kind of situation, and they also trying to test how other civil society in other nations can do for this situation. So and one thing that I pretty worry about is that not so many government dare to judge or dare to act stronger at these cases. Until now, we didn't see a lot of government officials in other nations, including United States or including even in UK, that we only seen some former politicians have a strong response. But the current parliament members, they didn't respond very strong at those cases. So that's pretty, I think I would be worried about that. If the Western democracies, that they don't act stronger, and they choose to be silent, and they choose to keep a distance with those cases, that probably bring China more space to oppress Hong Kong's democracy and other nations' democracy. So, and also China are using those cases to build a new model, to showing the Southeast Asia, to showing other nations that the one-party system can be effective, and one-party system can just what Johnson have said. It's like they can use the authoritarian rules to counter the liberal thinking, to counter the liberal democracies. That's what we have to worry about. And we can see that Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, some other Southeast Asia countries, including Philippines, are all trying to follow so-called authoritarian regime or authoritarian rules to manage their tensions inside the civil society. That's recently we can see a very clear trend that has already happened in other nations. So I do think that we have to be aware of this current status that China is developing a new model and export the new models, and it work in a lot of different fields, in a lot of different nations. So that's what I'm worried about. Yeah.
Dorjee, if there is something you want to add to what Feifan and Johnson just went through, and also really quickly for those who are watching this discussion right now, if you have any questions that you would like to ask, you can directly email it to me at tendor@gmail.com, tendor@gmail.com. We still have about 20 minutes left in the discussion, so if you send questions right now, I'll be able to get to them and pose it to the speakers. Dorjee, did you want to add something? Because if not, we can move on to the next question for all of you guys.
Yeah,
but yeah,
we can move on to the next question.
Okay, so what I'd like to ask all three of you is, So there was a lot of change happening, not only in Hong Kong, but also in just the general political scene in China right now. There has been a lot of speculation on what Xi Jinping is planning, and as opposed to what a lot of people kind of expected him to be a reformist leader 5 years ago, I think all those kind of rosy expectations have been completely defeated right now by the developments of the last 4 years in China. And Xi Jinping has instead turned out to be the most authoritarian leader that China has seen since Mao Zedong. That's sort of a consensus among many of the China experts right now. And at the same time, you know, when a government or when a regime goes through these intensification of their restrictions, some of the structures of the way they rule, some of the structures of governance, you know, all these begin to change, right? So in China, many people are seeing not only on the ground level where many Chinese citizens have suffered, you know, let alone Chinese, also, you know, many Tibetan citizens, many Uyghurs, Mongolians. All of these people have, you know, seen greater crackdown during Xi Jinping's regime. But even at the very top, in the CCP ranks, in the Politburo, there has been unprecedented purging, right? Unprecedented crackdown within the ranks. So as a result, I think Xi Jinping may have consolidated so much power, but at the same time, he has also made more enemies than any other Chinese leader that we have seen in recent memory. So what does that mean for opportunities for the democracy movement? Whether it's in the Chinese democracy movement, or whether it's in the Hong Kong democracy movement, or whether it's in the protection of Taiwan as an independent nation, or whether it's basically the freedom of Tibet. You know, Tibetan people right now have been pursuing a free Tibet for over 50, 60 years now. And we all know that over the last 5 or 6 years, more than 158, I think around 159 Tibetans have self-immolated, demanding a free Tibet and demanding that His Holiness the Dalai Lama be allowed to return to Tibet. So the resistance in Tibet, in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, in China, and also the Uyghur people, the resistance has not subsided. The resistance has actually increased and developed steadily, right? So given that, what may be some of the opportunities that you can see coming in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, that our various movements for freedom and democracy and human rights could seize these opportunities? So do you see anything on the horizon, given the political changes that are unfolding right now?
Maybe I'll go first. So right now, the situation in China is really bad. I would say it's very troubling for civil society, especially with the 4NGO law and also recent crackdown on ethics morality, labor organizers, and even women's organizers. Some friends who are working on LGBT movement, which is kind of moderated or tolerant in previous time, are also cracked down by the government. So I do think there is a lot of crisis in civil society now in China, which require more flexible culture, flexible strategies, and also tactics in engaging with civil society of China. So, for example, how can international community trying to embrace or amplify the liberal values in soft culture? For example, punk rock or rap song. How do you or strengthening foundations for liberal culture by other approaches? That would be something that international community have to answer. And secondly, there's of course a lot of crisis in within the CCP and also the regime itself. So, for example, the Belt and Road Initiative, it is the largest economic plan ever in China. That they are trying to invest a lot in different foreign countries, Middle Asia, Southeast Asia, and even to Eastern Europe. And the reason for that is because for so many decades, the Chinese Communist Party legitimacy lies on the economic performance. And the economic performance lies on exploitations of their own workers and laborers. But now there are other countries who can compete with China. They can even multinational corporation can pay even less cost in other countries. So they're moving out from China. So there is a excessive production of product in China, and this is why the Chinese have to implement this economic plan and also raise the demand from other countries on Chinese goods. So, which leads us to other questions, an important question, which is how should the international community respond to this economic expansions of China? Obviously, with this this forms of globalizations, it's not going to be good for grassroots community in other host country like Southeast Asia country. There will be a lot of labor violations. There will be a lot of human rights violations from Chinese investment. So what we're going to do is to hold Chinese government accountable. They want to expand their economy. They will have to play with the rules, like adapting to human rights and other human rights standards. And this is the way that we would not make CCP as the sole party that can benefit from this economic expansions. And if they cannot benefit from it and maintain their economic legitimacy to its people, then they will have to open up their government to open up more democratic institutions in response to this content of the Chinese. That's, I see an opportunity in here.
Dorjee and Fei Fan.
Yeah, Fei Fan, you want to go ahead?
Oh, okay. I think, to be honest, I'm quite how to say, I'm not so optimistic about the international community to deal with the China's expansion, not only on the economy section, including the political expansion, because we already see that a lot of countries that, including Europe, including United States, including a lot of different nations, that they are now they're still being silenced, and that's what I worry about. So I'm not so optimistic about how those governments can act, or how much their willingness or determination on democracy. But I do think that there's still a gap between the government and the civil society, because we can see that the civil society work, they put much more efforts on protecting human rights, advocating about human rights, democracy, democratic reform, or the civil society among the regime and in other nations. They do more than their governments. So I would say that we probably need a more stronger ties between different civil societies, not only in East Asia, in Southeast Asia, but also in a global stage. We have to the civil society, the member of civil society, or the member of social movements, we have to work stronger and harder on connecting other movements and to bring all those different progressive progressive movements to know the real situation, what already happened in Asia and Southeast Asia. So and I believe that we also have to put more efforts on changing our political institution in our own nation, in our own country. I'm saying including Taiwan, including other nations in Asia. The civil society's job is to hold our government accountable on reacting the cases in China, the situation in China. We have to let them know that people are care about the Hong Kong situation, the Tibetan issue, and also the problem that how the crisis now the Chinese people are suffering. Yeah. So you know, as people in Taiwan, I would say that we're trying to make our government, the current DPP government, to know what we care about, and to know if they don't act and if they keep silent, what trouble would be, what would be the cost of this kind of silence. And I do think that for Taiwan, that we don't have too much space for being silenced, because we're not like other nations in Europe or in other regime. Taiwan has also act as a direct at the front line of just what I said that Hong Kong and Tibet are facing. So that's so I hope that we can push the Taiwanese government to act more stronger at reacting the cases in Hong Kong and the cases in China and Tibet. But we're still facing that a very difficult situation is that our government still keeps some ambiguity, and to try to use this kind of blur and ambiguity method to maintain the relation with China, and wish that the China will save more space for Taiwan's government or for Taiwan to engage in the international community. They still have some expectation or some anticipation that they can buy some space through this kind of silence. But I have to say, not only Taiwan but also the whole international community, we will not gain any space through this way. And at least at this moment, I believe that China will only just what Tendo you just say, that many people in 5 years ago, many people expect that Xi Jinping will be kind of a reformer and kind of people that are trying to bring the CCP to reform. But the fact already proved that this kind of anticipation is quite naive. So if we keep waiting, if we keep silence, the whole international community will pay for it. We will face the cost ultimately in the future. So the cost is that China is very obviously, and they have a very clear goal, including their One Belt One Road, including their AIIB project, including their investment in different nations, that they have a very clear goal that they try to dominate the international community, and they also try to replace the United States in the international community. They try to be a strong superpower, a real superpower, and a responsible, in some way, responsible superpower. So you can see that on one hand, they act like using using some they try to act they're responsible for the climate change. They're responsible for a lot of global issues, and they try to play like a real superpower. They're paying responsibility to the global challenges. But on the other hand, they suppress, oppress the civil society and export the one-party system. That's what we are facing now. So if the international community, whole international community, keep silent and still waiting, that hope this kind of silence can be a method to engage with China, that's totally wrong. Because the rule of the authoritarian rule of China can use the totally same way to engage the democratic institution. So that's what we are facing now. Yeah.
Dorjee?
Yeah, I agree that with Xi Jinping, there were some kind of expectation from the global community as a liberal or reformer, but from the Tibet case, situation inside Tibet under Xi's dictatorship has changed from bad to worse. And Tendor just mentioned about the case of self-immolation and arrest of many Tibetan people. Even hear some information about, police brutality in Kanze, and there were like people beaten, only a few days ago, and also we hear like crackdown on information, like crackdown because they share some information in internet. So there is a total kind of lockdown under the regime. And to be honest, I really don't have any expectation from a head of regime, which itself is it's formed by the using violence. And CCP right now, communist regime, is one of the most corrupt system or regime which we have right now, and one of the most violent regime. And changing just a head doesn't change the whole structure. And but what we see right now, because of the crisis in the international community, like the crisis in the West, I think Xi Jinping is being smart in terms of taking this opportunity and really trying to push China at the global stage and trying to project China as the leading next global leader, taking the opportunity what is happening in the West, in US, and by using economy as a channel. The project One Belt One Road initiative by China is a part of that. And I think rather than really waiting for global community or government to act, it is now, I think, time for us to stand stronger. And I agree with Fei Fan, getting more connection and strengthening the whole civil society network is really crucial in this point. And when China recently organized One Belt One Road initiative conference in China, and there are many global leaders went there. Almost, I think, 23 states went there. But there are many other states, powerful states like India, who totally reject because India think it's a threat to India's security. Also, EU has not support this project. They have concern in terms of transparency and fair trade. But I don't see much about human rights issue there. So I think there's an opportunity, like how we should like action and really trying to real face of Xi Jinping, the real face of current CCP, and the recent incident of the death of Liu Xiaobo and the arrest of Hong Kong activists, and also like many arrests in China that is happening for the last few years. We need to really strengthen ourselves, and we need to start. I remember like almost like 5 years ago, like when SFT and a lot of Tibet group has called for multilateral kind of like approach to the government when they really try to put China accountable, because China also try to use like unilateral kind of approach, be it like the South China Sea or like issue in like South India, South Asia. and like, other issues, human rights issue, they always try to deal it unilateral way, so that, like, they have a power over, because of their economy, strength and whatnot. But we have been calling for multilateral kind of like approach by the international community, world leaders who believe in democracy and freedom and justice and human rights. But I think it is now time for us as a activist, as a leader of the movement, be it like Tibetan movement, Hong Kong movement, Taiwan movement, and other is Turkestan movement, or other, like, movement. And also there's a lot of people also, like, in the civil society network. We recently had some meeting with, like, some of the, like, key kind of leader in different civil societies member, because they're equally concerned about like China not being able to accountable from their government, and, like, now what they're doing right now. So I think there should be a multilateral kind of approach from our side, and rather than expecting, like, we should really stand strong and be more bold, and really try to push ourselves, like, in the front, and shame Xi Jinping for what he is doing, and take this opportunity when they try to come to the West or to the global community. And global community is our strength. Like SFT has a member in almost like 30 countries, and we have like Tibet movement in all these countries, and also, like, we have, like, people who support for Hong Kong, Taiwan in this, like, global community. So how we can use this battleground in this stage, and how we act stronger, because the world leader, when they trade, they also benefit. Who shake hand with Xi Jinping right now are also not keeping the promise of the basic value that their country stand for, and a lot of people are concerned about that. So I think it is not late for us to really do strong action outside. And yeah, so from the Tibet movement side, I think you said it, Johnson, before, about how China tried to approach Tibet in 1951 with the so-called 17-point agreement, and that was signed under duress. And then people who went there, Tibetan representative, have no right actually to sign. They were just there to, like, share and from the Tibetan side. But then they were forced to sign the 17-point so-called agreement. And under that, China tried to claim Tibet as Tibet was liberated at that time. But 17-point agreement has been, like, rejected soon after His Holiness Dalai Lama came to exile. And right now, that's illegal. It's a legal document. It's not a legal treaty. It was signed forcefully. And all this year, His Holiness Dalai Lama has really opened up and really tried to work and with the communist regime. But the regime right now, which is so violent and so corrupt, is not ready to really negotiate. And that's why from the Tibetan side, it's been almost now 10 years, there has been no dialogue with the communist regime, even though, like, from our side, the Tibetan government, the Tibetan Central Administration, Central Tibetan Administration has opened the platform for dialogue. That is not happening. So I think now for us is the smart way of doing is to really build our movement at a level that we really force or pressure them to come to dialogue, if we want them to listen our voice.
Yeah.
So I think like together, we can be strong, and we have to really engage international community in a stronger way.
So I think we are coming to the end of our discussion. So what I'll do is actually give everyone an opportunity to just make a concluding remark by way of actually sending a message to the people of Hong Kong. And before we get to that, I wanted to just kind of support the comments made by all three of you about the need for an alliance against repression, an alliance against censorship, because I think one of the greatest mistakes that has been made by people in the free world or governments in the free world, or even different movements in the free world, has been this idea that, as long as we get to be free here, we should respect if we should respect whatever China wants to do for itself. And if China wants to be a dictatorship, that's up to them. If China wants to be a repressed nation with no free speech, no free thought, no freedom of religion, that's up to them. That's, I think, has been a kind of a cultural relativist thinking in the West in recent years, for a number of years. And it has turned out to be completely bankrupt and completely false, completely destructive to our own freedom for those of us living in the free world. Because at the end of the day, repression and freedom are two things that are completely opposite. And they both do not live in isolation from each other. We are not living in a vacuum, right? China is not in a vacuum. We are not in a vacuum. Taiwan, Hong Kong, we are not in a vacuum. So basically, all of these elements have impact on each other. And I think, I think of repression and censorship as a airborne disease, like something that's very contagious. And it's kind of like, just like climate change, all the smog, all the pollution and smog in China, we cannot treat that as a Chinese problem, because the smog actually blows over all the way to Hawaii and California. So just like that, I think censorship is actually a very, very contagious thing. Repression is an extremely contagious thing, so that it is not only Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Tibet that are impacted by the Chinese dictatorship, but actually even many other countries in the West, even as far as Europe. Just last week, we found out about Cambridge University Press, how they have been forced into censorship by the Chinese government. Not really forced, but basically bought into censorship. And they started removing articles from their online journal in China, the China Quarterly website in China. They removed all these articles, about 300 articles about Tibet, Taiwan, Tiananmen, Hong Kong, democracy, Dalai Lama, Liu Xiaobo, right? So, and before that, just a couple of weeks earlier, Apple, Tim Cook of Apple decided to remove the virtual private networks, the VPNs, from the App Store in China, basically making it much easier for the Chinese government to arrest and imprison people for simply going to certain websites, simply looking for information, simply looking for news and analysis. So the censorship is basically not limited to China. It's coming to our shores. It's coming to Europe. It's coming to America. So I think if we, globally, if we do not go on the offensive against censorship and against repression, we really cannot afford to fight defense all the time. I think the idea that we can just fight defense all the time and protect our freedom over here is completely delusional. It's, we are living in denial. So the only way to fight against censorship and repression is actually to start an alliance against repression, alliance against censorship, alliance for freedom. And right now we absolutely need an alliance for Tibet, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. And actually, one of the things that I wanted to mention is, the organization, Human Rights Network for Tibet and Taiwan, for example, that was started by our friend Tseten and Xin Yi. It's an organization doing work for human rights, both Tibet and also in Taiwan. And I think it's a very interesting example because it was one of the groups that played a key role in organizing the conference with SFT earlier in Taiwan. And I think through these kinds of initiatives, we really have to fight repression and censorship on all fronts. But we need to develop a offensive strategy that goes further than simply defending each university and each school, each institution at a different time. So that's something that I just wanted to put out there. And to conclude, there was one question that came from the audience, and that was for Johnson. The question was, how have you maintained a continuum when it might seem unclear how distant in the future your end goal might seem? How do you keep your supporters' passion going and developing further? So that's a question about Hong Kong directly for Johnson. And if you can start with an answer for that question and make your concluding remark. Then after that, yeah, Fei Fan and Dorjee, you guys, it'll be great if you can send a message to the people of Hong Kong and the democracy movement in Hong Kong.
Thank you for the question. Personally, what makes activists keep go on in this, you can say, sad moments or troubling moments in Hong Kong is fellow activists. That is the friends and also other activists who are still maintaining their determinations on democracy and also freedom and also a well-being for their fellow people that keeps people go on. And thinking people who are in jail, they are still fighting. So we have no reason to give up. And for the rest of the people, we will have to give them some guidance, some suggestions of new tactics and strategy. And this is what we are working on it. We are trying to work on a maybe 6 months campaign for the political prisoner, sorting, and also other social issues. And keep them participate into action is very important. That's how you make people still confident and see they can still work on a lot of things for their own freedom and the others' freedom. So for the concluding remark, I resonate all three of you on the alliance building and also international cooperations. And before Alex goes to jail, we have a lot of discussions on alliance building. And we do think, on one hand, human rights monitoring and focusing on human rights is really important because we are setting norms and also guidance for Asian country, which is still under semi authoritarian control. So setting an example and also guidance for civil society is very important. But on the other hand, we also need other approaches to try to bring people together. Because a lot of time, it's very usual for people not having feelings for other countrymen. So I imagine like country which is really far from Asia or from Hong Kong, they wouldn't really resonate to political prisoners or the situation in Hong Kong because it's simply too far away. So having them to understand the spillover effect of an authoritarian China is really important. And this is why climate change and the violations of labor rights, the impact on environment, we need to show the world that if they don't show up on these issues, it will eventually come back to them. The authoritarian China, this communist people, the Communist Party, they don't torture people because they like to torture people. They don't imprison activists because they want to. It is because the activists and also democratic movement, labor movement that fight for human rights standard is an obstacle for them to gain money, to exploit people, to accumulate wealth for themselves. So hold them accountable, block them from exploiting the others is really important. And an alliance that have visions on both human rights and economic rights and a sustainable future for Asia is really important. Asia doesn't have their own versions of human rights charter. Well, they do have some sort of mechanism, but it's not very functioning. So an alliance should start building on that, trying to build a common visions for Asia people. We have long been exploited by different countries, by colonialism, by this new kind of imperialism from China. What do we want? The question is, what do we want for our future? What kind of well-being do we want to bring for our people? We can start on thinking of that, and then we can start cooperating with each other. That's my concluding remark.
Thank you, Johnson. Stefan?
Yeah, the concluding remark, I would like to again express my solidarity with Hong Kong's people and with a lot of activists that I know, and especially those people who are in jail. I also want to think that our Tibetan friends and Tendo and Dorjee, you have this online conference, that the meeting that can make us express more deeply on how we can work together. I think it's what Johnson have to say is really important, that we already observed that or already see that the rise of China has already been a challenge for the whole global stage, for international community. And to think that what kind of future that we want, to think what kind of value that we want to protect or we want to pursue in the future, is quite important. I have a strong feeling about we're like a pretty similar atmosphere. Like when Nazi German is like rising in 1940. Is that, or will that be one kind of result of the rise of China? Will it be similar when China keeps rising and keep oppress the other nation, keep oppress the civil society? Will that become another another historical phenomena or historical tragedy and happened again to replicate the experience in 1940s, 1950s? We become a massive disaster for human beings, for human rights, for the value of democracy, for the freedom of speech, for every basic rights. Will China's rising cause the retrogression or resection of all this kind of basic value? That's what we have to think. That's we have to prepare. So in this regard, I would say that Taiwan, Hong Kong, Tibet would definitely need to work together, but also in the near future, we have to make our voice out to the international community, to let other different nations, civil society, can know that the China's rise or the rise of China is not only happened in Asia region. It's already happened in Africa, in Europe, in a lot of different areas. And that's very clear that when we are pursuing so-called economic growth, when we are pursuing so-called economic stability, or when we're trying to maintain the so-called peace or stability of the international community, if the cost will go beyond all those things that we can get, we can obtain, then is it correct to like letting China to using his very brutal way to export those authoritarian rules, authoritarian values, and to export this kind of model? So I think we're on a crossroad. The we have to decide right now that we should work together to against this kind of model to be exported to many different nations, or should we just keep silence to allow China keep rising and using this authoritarian regime to affect other democratic nations to destroy other democratic institutions? So the whole international community are facing a choice. And if we keep silence, if we keep doing nothing, then the whole situation will be probably what we don't want to see in the near future. So as my final remark, I hope that people in different countries, if you see this video, if you see this online conference discussions, not only support, we should not only support Hong Kong's political prisoners, but also people who are suffering in Tibet, and also people in other different nations who are suffering from China's enterprise to exploration, and also in different areas, people who are suffering from China's influence. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Fei-Fan. That was profound. Tosne.
Yeah, on the closing remark, I share my support and solidarity with the Hong Kong activists, and especially our 16 friends who has been jailed now. And I just want to let them know that that your movement in Hong Kong has really inspired a lot of people. I hear among the Tibetans, a lot of Tibetan youth was inspired how you have led your movement in Hong Kong. And that has been an inspiration to the international community. And right now, with the rise of China as one of the most repressive regime, Hong Kong is people are at the front line, standing against the regime, and I think if you look back in the history, freedom struggles are never been an easy. They face a lot of problem, but at the end, be it like civil rights movement in U.S., Indian freedom movement, and what happened with USSR, breakdown of Soviet Union, and how like people get free and independent after that. I think it has proved that people's fight against the injustice win in the history, and that will prove again in the future. And for Tibetan people, since 1959, almost like 60 years ago, when we lost our country by the military invasion from the communist regime, the same regime under the PLA force, which led to our leader to come to exile. His Holiness Dalai Lama came to exile. And for over the last 60 years, we have been fighting for our freedom. And my parents came from Tibet, and I was born in exile. And I grew up like, hearing the stories of people suffering there. And we never gave up. And it's been almost 60 years, but we know that our fight is just, and we have to continue. And I know like what with the people, right, our Hong Kong friends, they will not give up for sure, and they will stand strong. And when they came out of prison, we will celebrate for sure. And that will be a powerful message for the international community that, we will continue to resist, and their support will help us to achieve our goals sooner. But we will continue to resist because we don't have any other option. And this is what we have to do. And I stand strongly with the people of Hong Kong in their fight for freedom, democracy, and right to self-determination in deciding their future. And similar with Taiwan, we had worked with Taiwanese activists, and I had the opportunity for the last almost like 7 years to be in touch with Taiwanese activists. And every time I meet, our friend there, it inspired me. and I gain more knowledge, more experience in terms of how current regime CCP is, using different methods of repression and how we should fight back. And our Tibetan brothers and sisters are holding ground in Tibet, and that is the biggest inspiration for Tibetans in exile. And right now we have, as per the information of TCHR, the Tibetan Center for Democracy and Human Rights and Democracy, based in Dharamsala, we have over 2,000 Tibetan political prisoners in Tibet, in Chinese prison. That is the known number. There might be many more, we don't know, because the information is totally locked down. So they have never given up. And that's the reason that we have to fight, which it's always inspired me. So I my solidarity, and on behalf of Students of Free Tibet, on members and supporters all over the world, we stand strongly with Hong Kong, and we look forward for more cooperation. And I think also, just want to say on participants of first Hong Kong, Taiwan, Tibet, similar, sense of solidarity, like everyone I have spoke with, and they have similar, they stand strong with, our people. And I say Alex Chow and Sunny, who we met there. And I remember last time, this is the last thing, Tendo, when we were partying after the conference, Sunny mentioned me saying that I have a case coming up, and he don't know like what will be the consequence, but he's ready for that. And we said we were hoping and we were not expecting what happened right now, considering the Hong Kong situation, but I think they had crossed the line now. And for us now, we have to really stay strong and make it really, the international community, wake the international community up with our actions and and our work. So yeah, thank you so much for joining, Johnson and Fei Fan, and all our friends there in Hong Kong and Taiwan.
Thank you, Dorjee. Thanks very much. Thanks
Thank
to
you.
everyone for joining us for this hour. And special thanks to Johnson, all the way from Hong Kong, being in the middle of it, and taking the time to join us with this discussion. Thanks to Fei Fan from Taiwan. We hear you have a case coming up, and we have all of our best wishes with you.
Thank you.
And a lot of admiration and prayers as well. And thanks to Dorjee for putting together this discussion from Students of Free Tibet and organizing this. I take a lot of heart in the alliance that we have, and I just want to send a shout out to all the people of Hong Kong. And one of my very good friends, Sharon Ham from Human Rights in China, she usually likes to say how Hong Kong is the tail that wags the dog. And I think she's right. Hong Kong is a very small piece of island, small island with very small population, is basically shaking things up for China and the world, and basically in the middle of this huge turning point in world history. And I think the courage that the people of Hong Kong have displayed, the leadership and vision and confidence shown by the young leaders of this democracy movement, is a huge inspiration to all of us. And I truly believe that CCP, which has carried out aggressions against many countries, many places, many provinces, many territories, I think the CCP right now has clearly crossed a line in Hong Kong with that decision. And I think they picked the wrong target. I think what we have seen in Hong Kong really tells us that Hong Kong will hopefully be the, just like Waterloo was for Napoleon, I think Hong Kong will be for the CCP. And I think we can all help each other to make sure that truly happens. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for your facilitation.
Yeah. Thank you, Tendo. Yeah, and see you guys.
See you.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night.
Good night.